Welcome, my dear students. I hope you all are studying well during lockdown period. In this video, I will explain you chapter number 3, the American Civil War. Let's begin. Before getting into this video, let me introduce the contents of this chapter. Firstly, I will explain to you the introduction. Second, the causes of the war. That is, basic difference between the northern and the southern states and growing tensions over the slavery issue. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about Abraham Lincoln. Fourth, Civil War. And fifth, that is the last one, I'm going to tell you the importance of the Civil War. Introduction to the American Civil War. The American Civil War was a sectional rebellion against the United States of America by the Confederate States, formed of 11 southern states governments, which moved to secede from the Union after the 1860 election of Abraham Lincoln as President of the United States. The Union's victory was eventually achieved by leveraging advantages in population, manufacturing, and logistics, and through a strategic naval blockade denying the Confederacy access to the world's market. Let me brief you how the American Civil War happened. At the dawn of the 19th century, the USA was a union of 13 colonies along the eastern coast of North America. The Constitution of 1789 had given the USA a federal system of government. This system provided for the sharing of power between the federal government. Federal government is the government at the center and the governments of the member states. It allowed the states to participate in the federal lawmaking process through a legislature called the Congress. Each state had equal representation in the Senate. Senate is the upper house of the Congress, irrespective of the size of its population. A little less than a century after the War of American Independence, severe differences divided the states of the USA, leading to the American Civil War between 1861 to 65. In this war, the federal government of the Union, supported by the states of the northern USA, fought against 11 states of the southern USA, which had organized themselves as the Confederate States of America. In the mid-19th century, while the United States was experiencing an era of tremendous growth, a fundamental economic difference existed between the country's northern and southern regions. Let's understand the causes of the American Civil War. So, my dear students, let's understand the causes of the war through this hierarchy. First, basic difference between the northern and southern states, which includes economic development, trading terms, slavery, and territorial expansion. Another one, growing tension over the slavery issue, Compromise of 1850 and Fugitive Slave Act 1850. Basically, the differences that divided the states of America were economic as well as ideological. Basic difference between the northern and southern states. Here, we'll begin with economic development. So with that, I have categorized economic development into two ways. One in northern states, second in southern states. Firstly, we'll understand what happens in the northern states. The Industrial Revolution had diverse effects on the economic development of the northern and southern states of the USA. In the northern states, a large number of textile factories and manufacturing industries were set up, leading to the growth of towns and cities. Urbanization became even more rapid with the constructions of canals and the introductions of the railway. In southern states, cotton began to be cultivated on a large scale on vast plantations to feed the growing industries both in England and in the northern states of the USA. The southern states thus remained rural and exchanged raw materials for industrial goods. Trading terms. The northern states preferred tariffs, means taxes on imported goods, to make foreign goods more expensive than locally made goods. This would encourage people to buy the cheaper local goods. In southern states, they prefer tax-free trade with Britain in order to get cheap manufactured goods in exchange of raw cotton. Slavery. Slavery had been the major cause for the American Civil War. In northern states, Britain had shipped a large number of Africans to its North American colonies to work as slaves in the tobacco, sugarcane, and cotton plantations there. The Africans were captured and shipped in the most bad conditions to a foreign country to live and work amidst a people very different from them in terms of race, color, language, and religion. Basically, the slaves had no rights and received no wages for their labor. They were bought and sold, given away as gifts, and even gambled away like any other property. There were no laws to protect them from the cruel treatment they often received from their masters. They lived in unhygienic conditions, were often badly fed, and suffered from various diseases. Many were worked to death. In southern states, after the USA gained independence, slave labor continued to be used in the cotton plantations of the southern states. The slave trade gained new strength here when the Industrial Revolution increased the demand for cotton. In the northern states, on the other hand, most people worked in factories as paid laborers. Farms were few and small and could afford to pay the laborers they employed. As the northern states were influenced by liberal ideas and between 1777 and 1804, most of them abolished slavery and became free states. The slave states of the South opposed the abolition of slavery. Territorial expansion. As industries expanded in the USA, a large number of settlers arrived from Europe, especially from Ireland, Britain, and Germany. Most of them preferred to settle in the north. Thus, the north soon had a much larger population than the south. The settlers from Europe brought with them knowledge of new developments in science and technology. Actually, this contributed to the industrial growth of the northern states. The unexplored territories in the western regions of the North America began to be explored and people from the USA began to settle there. Some newly settled territories were absorbed into the USA as a new states. The Southerners, the people who belonged to southern states, wanted the new states to be slave states, while the Northerners, that is, the people who belonged to the northern states, wanted them to be free states. A movement for the abolition of slavery began in the North and gained strength around 1830. Those who joined this movement were called abolitionists. Let's understand the second point, that is growing tension over the slavery issue. In that, let's begin with Compromise of 1850. Initially, new territories were absorbed in a manner that ensured an equal number of slave states and free states. This was done to ensure the even distribution of the seats in the Senate between the slave states and the free states. A problem arose in 1849 when the territory of California wanted to join the USA as a free state. The Congress feared that the southern states would break away from the Union if the balance between the slave states and the free states were distributed. Ultimately, in 1850, California was allowed to join as a free state. This tilted the balance in favor of the free states. To please the slave states, the law providing for the capture and return of fugitive, that is, runaway slaves, was made stricter than before. Fugitive Slave Act 1850. According to the Fugitive Slave Act 1850, runaway slaves had to be returned to their masters. The law also punished individuals who helped slaves to escape. The Fugitive Slave Act 1850 was strongly resented by the abolitionists. In 1852, Harriet Beecher Stowe's book Uncle Tom's Cabin was published. It actually described the pathetic conditions of the slaves in America and roused widespread popular resentment against slavery. Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is most famous for leading the country during the American Civil War. His leadership in the North helped the country to remain strong and defeat the South, keeping the country united. He also pushed for the freedom of all slaves throughout the nation. Let me brief you, my dear students, about this great man of history. Abraham Lincoln was born in 1809 near Hurtgivensville in Kentucky. He rose from humble origins to become a distinguished lawyer known for his fairness and honesty. He was also a great orator. In 1856, Lincoln joined the Republican Party. This party favored rapid industrialization. It also opposed the extension of slavery into the newly settled Western territories, which would rather become new states. Lincoln, as a Republican candidate, won the elections of 1860 to become the 16th President of the USA. He served from 1861 to 1865. The Civil War. The Civil War in the United States began in 1861 after decades of simmering tensions between northern and southern states over slavery states' rights and westward expansion. Let me explain you more about the Civil War. The American Civil War was a civil war in the United States from 1861 to 1865, fought between the northern United States, those who are loyal to the Union, and the southern United States that had seceded from the Union and formed the Confederacy. The Civil War began primarily as a result of the long-standing controversy over the enslavement of the black people. The southern states felt that their interests were threatened when Lincoln, the Republican candidate, was elected President of the USA. Even before Lincoln had taken office, 7 of the southern states broke away from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. They chose Jefferson Davis as their president. Lincoln wanted to preserve the Union at any cost. He declared that he would even use military forces to resist the separation of the southern states. In April 1861, the Confederates attacked the Federal troops stationed at Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. This marked the beginning of the American Civil War. When Lincoln called for volunteers to suppress the rebellion, 4 more states joined the Confederates. The battles of the Civil War were hard fought. The Federal Army was larger than the Confederate forces, thanks to the large population of the northern USA. Moreover, the scientific knowledge brought by the new settlers from Europe helped northern USA to improve communication systems and weapons. As a result, the Federal Army was better equipped than the Confederate forces. The Federal forces also had a strong navy. The Federal Army and Navy won several battles in the Mississippi region in 1862. The Confederate Army, under very able generals, offered stiff resistance and defeated the Federal forces in several other regions. In January 1863, the President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, abolishing slavery in the areas still in rebellion against the USA. So far, the preservation of the Union had been the major goal of the Federal forces. Now, the abolition of slavery also became one of their goals. In July 1863, the Federal Army won an important victory at Gettysburg. In November that year, President Lincoln dedicated the National Cemetery at Gettysburg to the soldiers who had sacrificed their lives in defense of the Union. On this occasion, he delivered his famous Gettysburg Address, in which he set forth his ideals of democracy. Gettysburg Address. So my dear students, as I have already told you a little bit about Gettysburg Address, let me explain you further into this slide. The Gettysburg Address is a speech that US President Abraham Lincoln delivered during the American Civil War at the dedication of the Soldiers' National Cemetery in Gettysburg Peninsula on the afternoon of Thursday, November 19, 1863. 4.5 months after the Union armies defeated those of the Confederacy at the Battle of Gettysburg. It is one of the best known speeches in the American history. Lincoln proclaimed in his Gettysburg Address that the Civil War was a war for human liberty. He set before the nation the task of preserving the Union, which stood for freedom and democracy, so that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, would not perish from the earth. End of the Civil War. The Confederates finally surrendered in 1865. This saved the Union from breaking up, but in the same year, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by a Southerner. My dear students, on the screen you can see some of the importance of the Civil War. Here I am presenting in front of you why the Civil War has brought so many changes and why it is important in the history. Until now it is being considered as one of the biggest events in the world. The American Civil War upheld the importance of the central government. It established the USA as a country consisting of several states that have control over their own affairs but are inseparably united as one single nation under a central government. This implies that the member states of the USA cannot break away whenever they want. In 1865, slavery was abolished everywhere in the USA. Later, freed slaves were granted citizenship. After the Civil War, the citizens of every state of the USA were also granted citizenship of the Union. All citizens were given the same rights ensuring life, liberty, and property. This held the promise of equality for all citizens. For some years after the Civil War, the northern states played a more active role in politics. This led to the rapid expansion of industries, and the construction of railways was undertaken on a very large scale. By the end of the 19th century, the USA emerged as one of the most powerful industrialized nations of the world. So with that, my dear students, I am concluding Chapter 3, The American Civil War. I hope you all must have understood the chapter very thoroughly. In case you have any doubt, you please ask your concerned teacher. Here I am concluding, but before that you need to understand some of the points to remember which are being included in the video previously. Go through it properly and keep all your doubts with you and ask your teacher. This is what we call a summary about the chapter. In the next slide, you will see some of the exercises which you need to do it by yourself. Let me read out for you, my dear students. A. Fill in the blanks. First, Dash wrote the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. Second, in 1863, Lincoln issued the Dash. Third, in Dash, the USA adopted a federal system of government. Fourth, Abraham Lincoln was born in Dash. Fifth, the Confederates finally surrendered in Dash. Sixth, those who joined the movement for the abolition were called Dash. Seventh, in 1856, Lincoln joined the Dash Party. Exercise B. Answer the following questions. First, Who were the abolitionists? Second, write briefly about the Gettysburg Address. Third, who was Abraham Lincoln? Fourth, when was slavery abolished in the USA? Fifth, write the total number of Confederate states fighting the American Civil War. Sixth, what is Emancipation Proclamation? So my dear students, you need to submit this assignment to your concerned teacher. Stay home, stay safe. Thank you and have a nice day.